Good morning. It is time to have some coffee. Sunday morning, and it's been a momentous week in World of Tanks. I don't know, is momentous? Maybe that's overselling it a little bit. Believe the hype. Maybe not momentous, but some interesting things have actually happened. So we're going to go over a few of those things while we have a coffee and talk about World of Tanks. We'll go through the specials and missions as usual. I'm going to talk about Warhammer 40K. The infection is spreading. Actually, it's not that big a deal because I think they kind of did it right, but let's talk about some of that because it's interesting. Number 3, Frontline. Anybody doing Frontline? I'm going to give you some thoughts on Frontline myself from my perspective. Fourth thing we're going to talk about is, it's going to segue into our last item. We're going to talk about the 268 version 4 nerfs on Super Test. As you know, I usually don't talk too much about Super Test stuff, but this is going to segue, you like that word, segue, into a Mirazor question and answer. And it's wrapped all around the balance issue in this game, so we'll finish up with that. Let's get started. Grab your coffee. Welcome back to Coffee Talk. Thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate your support, so let's go. Before we really jump into the missions and specials we have going on, I'll give you a quick update on how I'm doing on my grind here with the Pantera. So I am currently on the tier 8. Down here, Italian tank, you can see it right here. I've managed to 1 mark it. Sitting at about 91 battles with a 57% win rate. The rest of the stats are on the low end of my tier 8. It's really taken me a while to kind of understand how to use this tank. I will do a review on it, but right off the bat, what I will say about it is it's not quite an autoloader and it's not quite a regular tank. So if you try to fight it as a regular tank, simply just spitting out a shell every time one's ready, it's going to be substandard because the reload is relatively long for what you get. You really need to try to play it as best you can as an autoloader, but if you play it as a pure autoloader, where every time you shoot your 3 shells, you run away and hide until they're all reloaded, you're probably going to find yourself in a bit of trouble as well. It really is a hybrid, and managing whether you reload all 3 or you take that first shot is the biggest key there, and that takes a lot of SA in the battle, which is not easy. It's not an easy tank to play, but it can be very, very effective. So we'll move on to the missions and specials, but I just want to give you a quick update. I'm about, where am I? 101,000 experience, so another 48 or so, and I'll be on to the 9, and then I'll kick out the review on that. All right, let's move over to the missions and specials. Oh boy, do they have a lot of stuff for sale right now. A lot of stuff. I mentioned the last couple of weeks it really started to accelerate, but when you look at the page now, the different number of different things they have that are specials are incredible. So the hard sell is on. I'm not really sure why that is. It's more than usual. So I don't know if that means anything or if it's just happenstance. In any event, though, they've got a lot of stuff. The reason I'm starting on the featured page here, because if you're interested in that BDR skin for the Warhammer, and I'll get into that in just a little while, but the place to buy it is on the featured page. It's right here. It's basically buying a camo scheme that's going to go on an already existing tank. We'll talk about that later, but that's where it exists. So let's go over to the specials, actually vehicles. I won't worry too much about the specials and gold and all that stuff, because what I want to show you is how many vehicles are on sale. Look at this. The ISU 122S and the Cromwell B are split out from the Berlin, I guess 5 now, it used to be the 4. You can buy them separately now. So there's a bunch of packages. I think you can get the Cromwell B by itself, more or less. Here it is. I guess there's 2 items with it, but it's about 20 bucks. Pretty good tank. The 122S, it's a casemate TD. It's a good casemate TD. Not amazing, but pretty darn good. So if you're into casemate TDs and you're a collector, that might be something you want to pick up. Otherwise, I don't see a whole lot of reason to have that. Come down here and we get to this KV2 Ragnarok, which is a Warhammer collaboration with Wargaming. Games Imperium or what Games Workshop, whoever the heck makes that game. I'm vaguely familiar with it, haven't played it. It's supposed to be a pretty fun game. But anyway, that's been called for a long time in World of Tanks PC, and a lot of that kind of thing is going on where they collaborate with these different games, enemy tanks, all this stuff. on other servers and on their other platforms or their other games like console and things like that, Blitz and that. So it's fairly common on some of those platforms, but has not been common here on World of Tanks, other than things like the Swedish rock band or whoever they are. I can't even remember who they're called. The Fury, things like that, where there's tie-ins with various movies and bands and things like that. Well, what's interesting about this here is this KV2, we'll just get into it right now about the whole Warhammer 40K thing. Look at the price of this thing. It's a tier 6 premium KV2. So they've basically taken a KV2 and turned it into a premium. There are some very small differences in some of the stats. There's actually a good video by 4 Tankers and a Dog that explains it. That's been dropped on the forum as well. So if you're interested in what those differences are, and it has to do with it being a premium and some small changes, go ahead and look that up. But really, at the end of the day, there's no difference between the two, except that when you click on this, we'll do this, because what you're getting is the standard premium stuff. 50% more crew bonus, a bonus in experience, and a bonus in credits on a KV2. Remember, with a KV2, you're probably firing just regular HE, which is pretty cheap. This is probably a pretty nice tier 6 money-making machine, because it can acquit itself well at tier 8, no problem with that big derp gun. It's slow, it has a very specific play style. You're not going to zip around the game board with it, but as far as just a pure money-making machine, I bet this thing is probably right up there. My regular KV2 makes great credits, so getting a bonus with it as a premium. However, what I want you to notice here, which blew my mind, look at the Cromwell on the left that comes with 5 items. It's 20 bucks. What does it come with? A BIA crew, which, by the way, the KV2 Warhammer thing has as well. We'll talk about that. Garage slot, 500 gold, and it's 20 bucks. And we come back here and we look at the Warhammer 40K, and they want $33 for a tier 6 heavy that has a Brothers in Arms crew, all right, and a garage slot. 13 more bucks for a Warhammer 40K skin. Holy macaroni. Now, if you play Warhammer, my understanding is a lot of that stuff is pretty expensive, all the figurines and miniatures. I don't know. Are they called figurines? Did I create a faux pas by doing that? Wow, guys, that's incredible. That's a lot of money for a tier 6 premium with nothing else in the package. It really is. I mean, think about that. It's a tier 6 heavy premium, and they're charging the price that you would pay for a tier 8 medium kind of tank. That's incredible. Here's a tier 7 heavy, an IS-2 for 25. Wow. Here's a question that I don't know that I'm randomly riffing. Oh, they do get more credits and combat experience. Okay, good. Very good. Well, those are the specials. Let's move on to the missions that are going on right now. Hurry up and get your Ragnarok. It's only $33. Also remember that you can click the non-historical button on the settings if you don't want to see that. Oh, I also mentioned in the lead up there, or in the introduction, that they sort of did it right. And what I mean by that is you do have that button, so you can choose to not see them if it bothers you. But if you look at it, yeah, it says Warhammer and it's got some paint schemes, but it's not crazy, right? It doesn't really look like a cartoon tank. There's stuff added onto it that it never had, obviously, a big searchlight and the smoke grenade launcher thing. But it's not terrible, right? It's not awful. It's not a pink enemy tank or something really ridiculous. And you can turn off the skin. I have mine turned off, so when I see these things, it says KV2R in game, and it just looks like a stock basic, not stock necessarily, but the color wise it's stock KV2 driving around, so it doesn't bother me. I don't have to get bent, and it gives you a choice, right? So, and that's fine. That's why I say they're doing it right. Where I don't think they're doing it right is this price is outrageous. Why? Because they probably have to pay the guys over at Warhammer their cut of this thing, and there's a lot of Warhammer fans that are going to pay that price. I've seen plenty of them on the server already. So good on them. They'd be given a choice. They choose to buy it, but that price is outrageous. It really is. All right, let's move on to the missions. Really went off on a tangent. I think I'm off track here. I said we're going to have 40K as its own item, but we've already covered it, so don't expect me to go back to it unless I randomly go around in a circle again. I'm only about a third of the way through my coffee, so I'm not quite woke up. It's what? Almost 6. Interestingly, that's a late start for one of these for me. I'm usually up earlier. Italian Tech Tree. This is the missions that the Italian Tech Tree has held out for a while. I've obviously finished it. Remember, this is where you get Gigi Buffon. I actually have Gigi. He is in my garage. He was given to me. Let's randomly move off in another direction again because I found this interesting. I may have mentioned it last week, but I don't know. Gigi is chilling out. Where is he? There he goes. Gianluigi Buffon. Did I say it right? Probably not. You can see that he comes with 6 cents already, and then I can go ahead and jump into my next skill that I'm going to train right away. He is trained for the Fiat 3000, which is the Tier 1 Italian tank. Now, they have a whole system they've built in a UI for the personal missions where you can take a crew member from whatever nation you want and assign them to any tank you want in that nation, give them any position you want in that nation. Why could they not have used that same system for old Gigi? And if they wanted him to be a commander, just lock out the commander part for that particular one. That's just coding. And then use that exact same system so that people can choose where old Gigi goes instead of putting him in the Fiat 3000 and making you retrain the guy. Man. All right, that was random. Back to the missions. Today is the day of randomness. Here's an interesting thing over on the events tab. Events tab, by the way. So GG was an event. I would agree with that. Well done, Wargaming. You got that right. Get your BDR G1B. This is like a mini on track, right? Mini on track. It's now event. The on tracks have been switched to events. The Bout Chat 25T is on track. What's cool about this little mini on track, and I sort of hope they do this a little bit more. It would be neat if they had an on track and a mini on track. The mini on track is kind of aimed at getting you to like level 5 level. Tier 5 or 6, whatever the BDR G1B is. I think it's a tier 5. It's tied into the Warhammer thing because that paint scheme I talked about only goes on the BDR G1B. So the second thing that they collaborated with Warhammer on is first the KV2R. The second one is putting it on a BDR G1B, which a BDR G1B sort of looks like a Warhammer tank anyway. It's a real tank or a real mock-up, whatever. I think it was real, but I don't remember. Anyway, it's more real than just a fake 440K tank out there. And since it sort of looked like one, then they put a paint scheme on it, which is, it looks all right. Again, you can turn it off if you don't want it, but that's cool because it helps you get up to it, and you can drive these little French tanks, French heavies that almost nobody plays. And there's some goodies along the way. So that's pretty cool. In fact, it's probably worth it just to get the medium caliber tank rammer, the improved vent, and the enhanced gun laying drive. So pretty cool. Over on the missions tab, tank masteries, standard. There's 2 of those things, and then there's a supply raid thing going on this weekend. That's pretty much it on the missions. Get old GG done. It's a ×2 weekend, so nothing really special right there. Okie doke, where are we? We're going to move on to thoughts on Frontline next. Thoughts on Frontline. I'm going to be honest, I'm a mixed opinion on this. I did enjoy it. I've only played it a dozen times, maybe a little less actually, because I'm only to rank 10 or tier 10 rank or whatever they're calling it. And several games I've got 2 ranks, so I'm probably maybe 8 battles total. And I'll tell you why I've only done 8. There's multiple reasons. Number 1, I'm grinding this tank, and while I can play this tank in Frontline, once it gets destroyed I can't play it anymore, and then I'm stuck in Frontline for another 20 minutes. Now, if I'm good enough and I rage around in this same tank the whole time, then I stand to make a lot of credits and experience on it. So I do understand that. That's the good and the bad. But that brings me to the fact that it is a 30-minute game a lot of times. 20 realistically, but somewhere between 20 and 30 you're going to be invested in that one game. It's all tier 8, which is both cool and not. I don't want to necessarily always play tier 8s. So that's another issue with it. People are saying that they love it and they want it to be permanent, but I'm not really sure they really are going to want that, because I'm pretty sure they're not going to keep the credits and experience at the level that it's at. I would imagine they may nerf the credits that you can get, especially when you're running around with premiums. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe they don't touch it. But some people have made incredible amounts of credits playing the game. What I don't know is that because they're playing the game World of Tanks more, just because they like Frontline, and consequently when they're playing a bunch of premiums in a row, and they don't shoot gold, they're able to make a lot, meaning that they could do the same thing in randoms if they wanted to. It seems like the earning potential is a little bit higher, just based on being able to fix your tank, get more ammo, get back into the fight, keep on pumping out damage, that kind of thing. But 10,000 is a pretty good game if you think about it. 10,000. You can do 2,000 or 3,000 in a 5 to 7 minute game for a standard game. So if you do the math, I don't know. I'm not sure if you're going to get much more out of your Frontline experience. So, like I said, I'm of two minds right there, and some of that is contradictory. Would I want this to come back and be around? I guess I don't really care. It's not interesting enough to me to keep me playing it constantly. If it was in the game, it wouldn't bother me. It's not like it's doing anything bad to the game necessarily. It does give you a place where you can take your tier 8s and just fight tier 8s. But I find the battles to be just kind of chaotic. Some of that has to do with the meta hasn't settled down, and it may do so in the near future. In fact, there is already a difference between the way I see it played like yesterday than from the first couple days. People are starting to understand some of the strategy and how the meta works and what you need to do to win. But, and here's the big thing about it, what I think I've noticed more people figuring out is what it takes to farm. And there is a lot of vision games played where people are trying to stay just out of spotting range and just pumping out shots into people. And I have this called up because the autoloaders tend to be a big deal in that game. You have a great opportunity to stay out of sight, shoot all your rounds down range, and hide and get reloaded. Fast tanks are important, but not lights. As in, quick mediums are quite effective because there's a lot of terrain to cover. It lets you get away, something you can't really do a lot of times on the small constrained maps that the regular version has, that pubs have, so that is interesting. However, scouts don't seem to have much of a role. There are some bushes and things, but passive scouting, I don't know, not that important. Hard to get around in a scout without being seen because there's so many tanks on the board. But I did have a couple of games that were quite fun in a scout because I just simply raged around, dodging shots, in and out, around people, circling, strafing. That can happen because it is such a wide open map. So there's a lot of things in play here that I don't know where it's going to go. If you're going for pure credits and win, maybe a scout's not the thing. There are certain phases where scouts can be effective, especially on the wide open early part when you're trying to get some spots for all the campers and their autoloaders sitting back trying to blast things. So if I was going to have fun, I'd jump into a scout. If I wanted to make credits, I'd grab probably a fast premium medium or a Scorpion G, that kind of thing, and shoot as little gold as possible, and then you're going to make a lot of credits. So Frontline's been interesting for me. The other part of this discussion, though, is how many different game modes are we going to have brought out and have at the same time? Theoretically, right now, what do we have? We have Grand Battles, which is sort of a pub match, but not. That's at tier 10, so it's an odd one. Not much going on with that. Then we have ranked battles. In theory, who knows if that's ever coming back. So ranked battles is another thing for tier 10. And then we have frontline for tier 8s. And they all sort of seem to be in development at once, although I haven't heard much about ranked battles lately, so maybe it's back into the trash can or been on the back burner. I don't know. The question then, it still remains for me, how many different modes and focuses is the company going to have? You know, when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So I don't know. I'm not sure where this one's going to go. This ends eventually, and then there'll be, again, the decision of when it's going to come back. Maybe it comes back at tier 7. Maybe it comes back at tier 6. I don't know. But it has been an interesting kind of thing. Let me know your thoughts down there on the comments, in the comments section. I know a lot of you have probably ground out quite a bit of this. There are some decent rewards if you get to tier 30 and if you do it multiple times. So that's certainly something to think about and grind out. I just have not played that much World of Tanks lately. Honestly, Battletech's taken up some of my time at this point, as well as just good old life. But some of you may have worked through it quite a bit and have a different opinion. All right, let's move on. Well, what about this thing? What about this thing? The 268 version 4. There are some nerfs coming on the super test. Like I noted in the intro, I don't usually talk about super test stuff, but we're going to make an exception today. I think it's important enough because this thing is a ridiculous, overpowered TD. And it was released into the wild in this fashion, and it has taken them a long time to do anything about it. And we get into the Mirazor Q&A, you're going to immediately understand why, because they don't actually believe it's that big of a problem, and they are only very reluctantly doing it because of the outcry. As opposed to coming out and saying, oops, it shouldn't have been this powerful, here's the things we're going to do to fix it because it's affecting gameplay. Instead of that, it's him and Han and kind of sideways glance, well, you know, it's not that OP kind of thing. And again, we'll get to that. Incredible. This is why the company continually steps on its own schwanz. Continually. There is no doubt that this thing is a ridiculously overpowered tier 10 TD. If you believe it to be balanced, I'm telling you, you are wrong and you don't know what you're talking about. That's just the simple truth. You know, Foch calls it the Bobject, which made me laugh. Which he says any average Bob can do really well in it. The Bobject. That's fantastic. So what I've done is I've done a quick comparison here. Let's call this up and take a look at Bob. Bob's over on the left. Hello, Bob. And we got the rest of the tanks hanging out. So let's take a look at this. This is fascinating to me. So the 268-4 has a Wargaming given firepower of 378. That's their little number that takes into account all of these things. But that just made me laugh. It's got a 650 Alpha gun, so it's ahead of things like the Foch B and the Badger. Okay. Now the Foch B is a mobile platform with an autoloader. Mobile platform with relatively little armor at tier 10. The Badger is a very slow platform with a whole bunch of armor at tier 10. The Bobject is both. So his Alpha is in between the Foch and the Badger. Realize the Foch is an autoloader, so it's kicking out 400 multiple times. Okay, fine. 293 average pen. Well, guess what? Winner, winner, chicken dinner, near the top. Worse than the FV, but not so far below the other two at 295. So near the top. Rate of fire, right in there with everybody. Right in there with everybody. In fact, faster than quite a few of them. Reload time at 16, that's right there with everybody. Minus the FV being terrible. Gun traverse. For whatever reason, that massive gun in that casemate swings around faster than anything else. Is that a really super important stat? Not exactly. Not exactly. Try to keep it up near the top so everybody can see what I'm looking at here. Because, you know, I got to see my ugly mug right there. Gun depression elevation, yes, it falls down gun depression. -5 is quite painful. But guess how this thing's played? It drives up into your face and blaps you. And then it backs up and spins around faster than you can circle it in your medium. That's the gameplay. That's the game style. It actually has a pretty good traverse limit of 12. That's from left to right or right to left. Or as far left or right as it can see, actually. So that's good. Aiming time. Well, here's the interesting thing. It has a bad dispersion at 0.4, but it has one of the best aim times at that tier, minus the grill, which has a ridiculously fast aiming time. But guess what? The grill has 0 armor. Remember, this thing's as fast as a grill, basically, and has as much armor as a T110E3, basically. It has both. It does everything that these do better together in one TD. All right, so let's look at survivability. Oh, sorry, DPM is at 2393, which is right there with most of them. Near the bottom, I guess. So that's potentially a balancing issue for wargaming. But who cares? Because it's in your face, you can barely hurt it. It's so fast it can get anywhere it wants to be. That's just not really an important stat. Be quite honest, it's not that important stat in the whole game. If you've hung your hat on the DPM being a major balancing item in World of Tanks, you probably don't know anything about the game and shouldn't be balancing it. If it's not a massive outlier, say you've got one of these guys sitting at 5,000 DPM, now that's obviously an issue. If the Bobject was at 1,500, compared, that would be an obvious issue. But within these parameters here, not a big deal, because you don't really stand there and fire and fire and fire and fire. Oh, wait a minute, actually, with the Bobject, you do, because he's in your face and he's shooting you about every time he's reloaded. With the rest of these, you're being a bit more careful, especially with the grill. Unless you're double bushed, you're not firing and firing. You're hiding. Firing and hiding, firing and hiding. Some of these other tanks have to do the same thing. The 110E4 can't just sit out and fire and fire and fire. The 110E3 might be able to, if he's got a long alleyway and doesn't have to maneuver. If someone tries to go around him, he's in big trouble. Bob doesn't have to worry. Bob doesn't care about any of that. Bob's up close and he's firing, 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 firing because he's in your face. Hit points, for some reason, it's at the top of the class. Not only is it one of the fastest and most maneuverable and most heavily armored TDs, it also has some of the most hit points, because why not? There's the whole armor. You can see that quite good. Even the side at 100 for side scraping. That way you can bounce all kinds of shells side scrape. These things will side scrape. With a 12-degree right and left look, you'll see it sneak out from behind buildings and blap you and give you an angle, making this armor even more effective. I've seen SU-101s do this. They do the same thing. It's on the same line. Is it the top of the class? No. Is it close enough as it makes no difference? Yes. Remember, the grill, which is about as fast, has 0 armor. The Foch, not great armor. The really slow tanks have comparable armor, but remember, this thing does all that all at once. And it just gets worse. And really, at the end of the day, here, this mobility thing is the problem. Okay, so the main problem with this tank is right here, where you've got a 1,500 horsepower engine. 1,500 horsepower. I mean, that's 500 more than the nearest competitor, Foch B, which is a pretty fast tank. The grill is a faster tank, but it's a much lighter, 0 armor kind of tank, so it gets up by on 850. But 1,500 is so far into fantasy land for that time period, if you're having any kind of idea of historical accuracy, which I realize was thrown out the window a long time ago, but that is kind of thing is still said in defense of a lot of the things they do balancing-wise. Talking out both sides of your face, you put a 1,500 horsepower engine in this ridiculous tank. Specific power of 20. Not the best in class, but head and shoulders above everything except the grill, which you're still only 5 miles an hour slower than, which now we're getting to it, right? 55 kilometers an hour forward, only 60 on the grill. 22 backwards, the grill gets 15. That the just considering the armor and the mobility, how that got through balance, whoever let it through seriously should not be doing balance anymore. I don't want to say get fired. I probably said stuff like that in the past. That's up to the company. They do what they want, and I'm not here trying to burn down some guy's career. But I mean, you have got to look at that and say, are you kidding me? Who looked at that and said, oh, that seems fair. That seems like it should work in the game. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we'll get to what the supposed nerfs are in just a minute. All right, so that's the comparison tool. Let's get over to the supposed nerfs, because I think this gets kind of interesting. Here they are. This is off the Armored Patrol. Now, these are the nerfs to begin with. They changed the aim time from 1.92 to 2.24. In fact, it had 3 iterations. It's on its 3rd iteration, or second, I guess, second change iteration. Because initially they went to 2.21, then they went to 2.24. So they're messing around with the gun. The engine went from 1500 to 1350, still head and shoulders above everything. I don't know. It should be 1000 to be quite honest, at best. Power to rate from 20 to 18, and so the number that matters, the reverse number has gone from 22 kilometers to 20. That doesn't address the problem, fellas. It can back up so fast and spin enough, traverse enough with its tracks that it can keep just about anything in front of it, minus some of the fastest scouts. And depending on the terrain, even those will have sometimes trouble keeping in front of it or keeping away from its front. The bloom went from 0.1 to 0.15 from 144, so they've messed with that twice. They've realized that's not quite enough. And then while moving and things. So what they're doing is a very slight reverse nerf when it needs a huge forward and reverse nerf. A huge. And they're futzing around with the gun, which is not the problem. That's their idea of balance. They added a few more things, though. The blooms changed. The hit points went down to 2,000. That's reasonable. Traverse changes really don't matter. And here's the finally going after the maximum speed. So on the second iteration, they realized, you know what, it's still too fast. 50's too fast, fellas. It's still too fast. This huge, massive thing should be doing maybe 40 and a reverse speed of 15 to bring it in line with the rest of the TDs. 40's plenty fast enough for it to get up to the front and be the pushing, brawling TD type of TD, but doesn't let it wolf pack with mediums. I mean, it can, but it's not going to be leading the charge necessarily. Because right now what it does is it charges in, gets a lot of aggro, and then the mediums flow in behind it and take things down because they can't kill this thing. And if they concentrate on the mediums, then this thing starts blapping people right and left. Incredible. So there's the changes in the 268 and quite a long talk on what its massive problems are. I'm not really blazing any new ground here. Everybody who plays the game knows it's overpowered. Or do they? Well, here's a guy who doesn't think they're overpowered. We have another Mirazor Q&A. This is a translation once again. I have 2 different pages up here. The first one is status report, and the second one is the Armored Patrol. The reason I'm doing this initially is for everyone to realize that if you want to get kind of the whole story on this, if you're that interested in it, and most of you probably aren't, you're just getting it from me or not that interested, but the translations are different on the 2. That's my point. So sometimes I wonder exactly what we're getting. You have to be careful about taking the guy to task based on just one translation. Since I don't speak his native language or whatever it was done in, then I can't get some of the context that he's talking in. But I don't really need it for a lot of this because some of the stuff he is saying is absolutely ridiculous. So the first question that the Armored Patrol has is, did Mirazor get fired? He said there's some YouTubes being made about me being fired. Unfortunately for many of my haters out there, I did not get fired. All right, I have to assume he said my haters because that's kind of a meme or kind of a modern statement. That is not something that a professional would say when asked the question whether you get fired, right? Well, contrary to my haters, I didn't get fired. That's something one of these celebrities say on a reality show, right? Not a professional, someone who's trying to be a professional in a game development context in a very large company. The interesting thing about that question is it did not make Rita's status report article. They just cut that question out. So whether they didn't see that question or didn't think it important. So that's the second piece of why I have both up initially, is realize some of the questions asked and answered may not actually be on the particular article that you're looking at. You're just relying on them to feed you what they translated and what they thought. And sometimes it says, hey, there's the stuff we thought was important, and if you want to see more of it, you've got to go to more than one spot. That's standard research. You know, if you want the real story, then look for several examples of it. All right, that being said, then what we're going to do is we're just going to stick with the we'll stick with the status report version, because as I read the two, this one seemed, I'm going to say it painted him in a better light, but I think the translation was better because it sounded more like what somebody would say, that the Armor Patrol one came off a little bit more antagonistic, which he may have been in some cases, but it was also much more verbose. So I'm not sure if that was a good translation or not. Still, we'll go with this one. Again, you can look at both. Is Mirazor able to change the game himself? People mistakenly assume that I am the head of the balance department, and although I had my part in, I don't understand this really, it must be a turn of phrase for his language, turning some of the foreheads in technology trees, and had a direct impact on some aspects of the game. I am not responsible for global changes in the game itself. This is what Slava Makarov does. Not my fault, I didn't do it. Okay. What is behind some of the changes? For example, why did Japanese heavy tanks receive high caliber howitzers? This one's great. This is a great answer. These are always good for comedic relief. Japanese heavy tanks were not very eagerly played before this change. Well, yeah, because you made them ridiculously overpowered, so clearly people are going to play them. And the main reason was to encourage players to play them. All right, mission accomplished. And give them uniqueness. We decided on this type of weaponry in reference to the Japanese Navy. Many people have rated these changes as bad, and not many players want to have these tanks as opponents. But I believe that the only thing that is strong in them is the armor in certain places. My experience with these tanks is that they will only fire once before they are destroyed by enemies. A certain death is, for example, a medium tank approaching our side, because these tanks do not cope best in a face-to-face battle. Do I even need to explain to everybody out there how utterly ridiculous and wrong that almost that entire answer is? First of all, they fire more than once because they're so heavily armored, and it's so difficult to get around things in these corridors right now that they definitely don't fire once and die. That's simply not true. It's not even sort of true. It's ridiculous. So was he saying they don't get a lot of shots off? Okay, maybe that was what he was trying to say, but this seems fairly specific, and I don't think the translation would be that far off on it. The only thing that's strong in them is the armor. No, dude, you're a balance guy. All right, you're supposed to do balance. The balance is the whole package, dude. The armor and the gun combination, the corridor maps, the fact that HE doesn't have to pin, all of that stuff is what matters, right? So you can't say, oh, it's just the armor's too strong. But hey, it can be defeated by getting to its side. Yeah, yes, that's true. Thank you. God, awesome. That's not the balance problem, you muppet. All right, let's move on. Goodness gracious, that's now I'm all triggered and verklempt. Will the tanks with preferential matchmaker be changed? Good question. Everybody wants to know. Hey, what are you doing with that? Here I must strongly emphasize that I have very little to say when it comes to final decisions regarding changes in these tanks. Thank goodness. That's the first good news we've had. Oh, sorry, buddy, but wow. I'm concerned that the limited matchmaker must be removed from all tanks with preferential matchmaker buffs. Such E25 does not need changes. On the other hand, KV5 needs more armor. This was interesting. If you go over to the Armored Patrol one, over to, yeah, the Armored Patrol question, it makes it sound like he's saying the E25 won't have its preferential matchmaker taken away. I'm not sure. The two translations are quite different. What I'm getting from this one is the E25 doesn't need to be buffed. That's very interesting. Hey, take the preferential from it and it doesn't need a buff. That is interesting. Whereas the KB5 needs more armor and it works better if it has to fight against tiers 10. Dude, I don't care how much armor you put on it. That gun can't handle tier 10s. So I referenced my balance question earlier. And maybe there was more to that answer. Maybe that's actually in the back of his head. But he just threw out the armor thing as the main thing. Dude, the KB5, you can put any amount of armor on it you want. If it's still running around that 107 with the same stats, yeah, you're not competing at tier 10. I don't care how much you buff the armor. Oh, man. Let's see. So different, of course, changes in vehicle statistics are simple to implement. Really? Doesn't seem like it. But there's also a legal aspect to such changes. It's best to ask Slavi about it. All right. That's valid. I don't know how they're going to get around that or what the actual answer is. I'm not anywhere near smart enough on the legal aspects. But yes, these are premium bought tanks, and they're probably going to do a massive change on them. So there's going to be a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth, I would imagine. For me, where am I on that? I'm of two minds, like most things. If you're going to take the pref away, then they definitely need buffs. But without the pref, they're not as unique, like the WZ-111 and things like that. The IS-6. 357's kind of kicking their rear a little bit, because rarely are they on the top at tier 8. But at least they only see tier 9s as a prep. So, you know, it's a give and take. It really is. Plus with the creep, all right? The word I cannot come to right now. It will come to me eventually. But as all the tanks around it get better, these tanks start to suffer, and you have to fire more and more gold, and so the preferential aspect of it becomes worth less and less. That's definitely a hard one. I'm glad I'm not them trying to figure that one out, because I don't have an answer, to be quite honest on that. I guess if I had to, I would lean towards leaving it, and I'm not really sure why they think they need to change it, other than the preferentials are suffering a little bit with their new matchmaker. So it's a problem of their own making, and I'm not sure how they get out of that. All right, what exactly do you do at wargaming? That's a heck of a question, other than defend ridiculous tanks. What I do is interesting subject for conversation. It is worth mentioning here that the name of my position and what I do in wargaming do not necessarily go hand in hand. Oh, man. If I was his boss, I would have him in my office almost immediately, and we would have a little discussion about how you represent your company. I don't even know where to start with that. I answer questions, make minor decisions. Maybe I will make immediate decisions in the future. Dude, you have a job and you don't even know what it is? Just let that sink in for a minute. Let's say you had a senior developer or vice president in charge of whatever, and you asked him what he did in the company. He said, I don't know, I do a few things here and there, but my title doesn't go with what I do. So why are you there, and why are we paying you? That's incredible. How was the Object 268 V4, version 4 introduced? That's a fantastic question, fella. How was it introduced? My only connection is with the appearance. I was tasked with finding a potential replacement and decided this vehicle looks potentially easy to balance. Okay. And by the way, looks good. All right, so he's got he's invested in this thing. All right, so this is what's happening. I think he had a lot to do with this. And it's sort of coming down on his head, I think, without them admitting it. I had nothing to do with its balancing. I played it, and personally, I do not claim that it is an OP, rather that it is unusual. That's idiotic. I mean, if he's in your balance department right now, and he says that, then you know he doesn't need to be there anymore, because he doesn't get it. Looking at the win rate statistics, I can say that it is a good vehicle, so as you know, after the super test, it will be changed. His playing style will not change, the tank or whoever's playing, I guess is what he's trying to say. but the main features of this vehicle will be deteriorated. I do not understand why this cry and gnashing of teeth in connection with this tank. Good frontal armor, but easy to pierce from the side. No vehicle is a problem in many maps offering tunnel gameplay. That didn't translate very well. I don't quite understand. No vehicle is a problem in many maps offering tunnel gameplay. But without parsing the exact words and sentence structure there, the general idea from him is that it's not OP. Come on, man. You have every statistic says it's OP. Play the thing. Play against it. Look at the statistics. Just its actual tank statistics that we just went through. And you know right off the bat that it does everything every one of those TDs do. It's the fast gun platform. It's the armored slow tank, but it happens to be fast. Ridiculous. It's incredible. So what do we got here? Is he that clueless and out of touch? Or is he the front man for wargaming trying to tone down a little bit of the hue and cry? I don't know. Be quite honest. That one leaves me flummoxed. I'm dumbfounded that somebody... So either he doesn't believe a word he's saying because he's been told to go say these things, or he actually believes it. Which is worse? I don't know. I don't know. Have your views changed since you work in wargaming? Now, this is an interesting question, and I think it shows some honesty here for him, and that's good. You know, he was brought in, I believe he was a YouTuber. He was brought in kind of from the outside, had a lot of knowledge about the game. And I'm sure he had some ideas like I do about what they can do and what they can't do. And I would imagine if I went there, I would change my tune quite a bit because you start to see the inner structure. What's that a reference from? The inner structure. Anyway, so he says, yeah, it looks a little bit differently. A lot of people, let's see, let me read this. Since I see how it works from the inside, although it's not that I think the game is perfect or something, good, glad. And it never will be, I get that. But we can obviously improve it, and things that are problems should be addressed. I believe that it has become better. A lot of people say the opposite. Yeah, a lot of people do say the opposite, but it seems to me that it is better than it was, especially after the introduction of version 1.0. The game has been refreshed. All right, let's stop there for just a second. That is true. 1.0 was pretty cool. All right, everybody raise your hand right now if you, at this point, even notice the new graphics as far as the old. Can you even remember whether they were that much fantastically better or your game was less because you had the old graphics? I bet there's not a lot of hands raised right now. That's not to say new graphics weren't appreciated and good, but when you have the issues this game has balance-wise, referring back to 1.0 as part of the adjustment to your balance problems is probably not the best idea because nobody believes it and it's not true. Some maps are not the best balanced. That's an understatement. You made some worse, as a matter of fact. That's what you should be saying. You know what? We made a mistake on a couple maps. They're worse. Welcome to a real world where nothing is perfect. Oh, thanks, dude. Yeah, thanks for reminding us nothing's perfect. Yeah, got it. That's, again, I don't know how many things here I would have him in my office, but just about every answer. If you could change... That'd be cool if I had an office. I don't even have... I have this office, but it's at my house. All right. Okay, if you change one thing in the game, what would it be? If I had to make a choice... All right, so... We're saving the best for last because this just gets better and better. And if you want a good laugh, make sure you read the comments on the Armored Patrol here because people... I mean, they just come in loaded for bear and start unloading on this guy. All right. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of stuff. The 268 version 4, the types, the Japanese types, corridor maps, some maps that they made worse with 1.0, balance issues of various kinds. We didn't even touch gold, but we did touch preferential matchmaking tanks, and these are all questions that were asked, right? All of these kind of higher level questions about this game and gameplay. Hey, how are we going to address these things, these big deals in World of Tanks? What are you guys going to do? You know, give us a little insight. What's your thought? We're kind of interested in what's going on. And so they say, all right, cool. So we've asked you our questions. Now, what do you think is something that's a big deal that you would change? If I had to make a choice, well, okay, we asked you a question, so make a choice. I would bust Tiger 2 E100. I don't know what bust means. Maybe buff the Tiger 2. The E100 has good armor, E75 2, and the Tiger 2 is a pile. It does not fulfill its role as a heavy tank. Its armor is historical, so 2 drastic changes could be a challenge. Let that sink in for a minute. The thing he thinks is the biggest problem that he would jump on and fix is the Tiger 2. Yeah, man. You know what? Tell you what. If you just fiddled with the armor on the Tiger 2 a little there, buddy. I mean, serious, think about it. We just somehow figure a way out to make the Tiger 2 a little better. If we could just bring it more in line with the E100 and the E75, you know, so they play the same. I mean, could you imagine what that would do for play balance in World of Tanks if we just got the Tiger 2 a little buff in there? But it's a problem because the armor's historical on this on this tank. I'm sorry. When has historical armor been an issue in the last year, 2 years? What are you talking about, man? What are you talking about? I'm serious, though. If we could just get the Tiger 2 buffed, I mean, I see it every day. You got a Tiger 2 in that 357, and if it was just buffed a little bit to where it could fulfill the role like a E100 and E75 does, then I think the 268 problem goes away, and probably the. All right, I'm going too far. I get it. I'm going over the top, but that's fantastic. In conclusion, I will add that with some exceptions. Tier 8, 9, and 10 are competitive and have truly tragic tanks at these levels. I don't know what that means. Many people ask about the WZ-111 5A and Super Conqueror. WZ is a very good tank in the hands of a good player, but it's easier to penetrate its armor than the IS-7. He talks about the IS-7 a lot. I don't quite understand. He references the IS-7 in nearly every Tier 10 heavy discussion, as if it's the standard bearer or something. Super Conqueror when whole is, it says unfeasible, but the other one says undefeatable. But as soon as it reveals its side or bottom plate, it can be easily excluded from the game. It just kind of goes on with reiterating what some of the strengths and weaknesses of various tanks are. And finally, we get to the premium ammo question at the very end of this. The same applies to premium ammunition. If we took them, it says took her, but if we delete it or remove it, it would probably be a great cry. For such a large company, such a step is very dangerous. As a result, global changes can take longer. That's absolutely true, and it has to be well thought out and done. But at the same time, you cannot continually hide behind that excuse as the reason you're not doing anything when this has been going on for a good 2 years with no real movement on it. I think everybody who plays the game understands it, for the most part, that it can be difficult to balance and change things, but we also understand that it's very obvious when they're ignoring it because they don't know what to do, or they're just attempting to squeeze as much out of it as they can, or it's just too difficult and they don't want to deal with it. 1.0 was also a big excuse for a long time, which frankly is true. They were working on a huge update. But now's the time, fellas. I mean, we've been promised a lot of that stuff for a very long time. All right, that was a lot on Mirazor's Q&A, but at least there was a good laugh in there. Well, everyone, I wish I could make some of that stuff up. It would be pretty funny if I could actually make some of that stuff up. But the good news is it just comes to you and falls in your lap. We talked about the specials and missions. We talked about the Warhammer 40K thing. We talked about Frontline and some of my thoughts on that. Not fully formed thoughts. Eventually I'll get to that if I play it some more. 268 version 4, which segued into Mirazor's Q&A on some of the things that's going on in World of Tanks right now. So I will see you guys out there. As always, thanks for coming by. I am just about done with my coffee. Time to wrap this thing up and send it out, and we'll see y'all later.